The knock came at 3:47 in the morning. Not a polite tap, but the kind of desperate pounding that pulls you from sleep with your heart already racing. Marcus was the first to the door, pulling his flannel robe tight against the cold air seeping through the old farmhouse walls. Through the frosted window beside the entrance, he could make out a figure hunched against the wind, one arm raised to knock again. He cracked the door open. The woman on his porch looked like something the storm had spit out. Her jacket was decent enough, a faded green parka with duct tape patches along one sleeve. But her boots were caked in ice and her dark hair had come loose from beneath a wool cap, whipping across her face in the pre-dawn wind. She was maybe 30, maybe 40, hard to tell with the cold cutting lines into her skin. "Help," she said, and her voice was raw. "I need help. There's been an accident." Marcus didn't move to open the door wider. "Where?" 22 miles north, up past the old logging road. There's a family. Their truck went off into a ditch during the storm. The father's hurt bad. They have 2 kids with them." By now, others had gathered behind Marcus. Ellen, his wife, holding a flashlight. Their neighbor Tom from the house down the road, who must have seen the commotion through his window. Tom's teenage son Derek filming everything on his phone like this was entertainment. 22 miles, Tom scoffed. "Lady, nothing's 22 miles up that way except frozen death. The logging road's been closed for 3 years. "It's not closed," she said. "Just unmaintained. I came down it yesterday before the storm hit." Ellen shone her flashlight directly in the woman's face, making her squint. "And you just happened to be wandering around up there? In December?" The drifter, because that's what she clearly was, no permanent address, no ties to this community, reached into her jacket pocket slowly. Marcus tensed, but she only pulled out a folded piece of paper, worn soft at the creases like it had been opened and refolded 1,000 times. When she unfolded it, Marcus saw it was a topographical map, the kind hikers and hunters used, marked with pencil notations and grid references. "I know these mountains," she said. "I've been through here 6 times in the last 4 years. The family that's stranded. I met them yesterday afternoon at the old fire tower. They were trying to make it down before dark, taking a shortcut. I told them not to, but they didn't listen. I kept going south, made it here about 2 hours ago, started looking for someone with a vehicle and a radio." Tom laughed, a harsh bark that echoed in the cold air. "So let me get this straight. You're a homeless wanderer who just happens to have a magical map, and you want us to believe there's some family dying up a closed road in the middle of nowhere, and only you know how to find them." "I didn't say I was the only one who could find them," the drifter said, and there was something steady in her voice that cut through Tom's mockery. "I said I came down that route yesterday, and I know it's passable. Your road crews won't make it up there until noon at the earliest, and by then those kids will be hypothermic if they aren't already. The father has a compound fracture in his leg. I could see bone." Derek leaned in, still filming. "This is going to be amazing content. Crazy homeless lady tries to scam the locals." Marcus saw the drifter's jaw tighten, saw her take a breath through her nose like she was forcing herself to stay calm. "I don't want your money. I don't want anything except a vehicle with enough clearance to make it 6 miles up the logging road to where it gets too narrow. From there it's on foot, another 16 miles. If we leave now, we can make it by first light." "First light?" Ellen's voice went sharp. "That's 3 hours from now. You're talking about a forced march through a blizzard." "The storm's dying," the drifter said. "Wind's dropping. Temperatures holding at 19 degrees, wind chill probably down around 0. Moon's out behind the clouds. We can navigate." Tom shook his head. "Marcus, don't tell me you're actually considering this. She's obviously trying to pull something. Probably has friends up there ready to rob whoever's stupid enough to follow her into the woods." The drifter's hand tightened on her map. "The father's name is James Keller. His wife is Sarah. The kids are Amy and Ben, 7 and 9. They're from Portland, visiting Sarah's mother for Christmas. They took the shortcut because their GPS said it would save 40 minutes. I told them the GPS didn't account for the fact that the bridge washed out last spring and there's a 1/4-mile detour through rough terrain. They went anyway." The specificity of it landed hard. Marcus found himself looking at the map in her hands, at the careful notations marking elevations and landmarks. This wasn't some scribbled fantasy. This was the work of someone who knew how to read terrain, who had walked these mountains enough times to commit them to paper. "Show me the route," he said. Ellen grabbed his arm. "Marcus, you can't be serious." But he was already pulling the door open wider, letting the cold air flood in, watching as the drifter stepped into the light and spread her map on the kitchen table. She moved with the economy of someone used to making every motion count, pointing to landmarks with fingers that trembled slightly. From cold or exhaustion, he couldn't tell. "We're here," she said, tapping a spot on the map. "The logging road runs northwest from the county road about 4 miles east. Most people think it dead ends at the old mill site, but there's a continuation that cuts north through the valley. It's rough but passable in a truck with good tires. 6 miles up, there's a rockfall that's blocked the road since last winter. From there we hike. The Kellers are here." She indicated a spot marked with an X in pencil, where the road curves around Eagle Bluff. Their truck's in a ditch on the south side. The slope's too steep for them to climb out with an injured man and 2 kids. Tom moved closer, squinting at the map. "How do you know they're still there? Maybe they already got out. Maybe they walked down. In the dark? With a man who can't walk and 2 small children." The drifter met his eyes. "They're still there. And if we don't move soon, the cold's going to kill them regardless of the injury." Marcus straightened. "I'll get my truck. Ellen, pack thermoses of coffee and whatever food we can carry." "Tom, I'm not going anywhere with this crazy." "Then stay here," Marcus cut him off. "But if she's lying, the worst that happens is I waste a night's sleep. If she's telling the truth and we do nothing, that's 3 people I've got to live with on my conscience." Ellen was already moving toward the kitchen, but her voice was tight with worry. "If you're doing this, you're not going alone. Tom, Derek, one of you needs to go with him." Derek lowered his phone, the entertainment value suddenly less appealing when it meant actually stepping into the cold. Tom's face went through a series of calculations, pride warring with comfort. "Fine," Tom said finally. "But when this turns out to be a waste of time, you're buying the coffee for the rest of the winter." The drifter folded her map carefully, tucking it back into her jacket. "We need to move now. Every minute we wait is heat those kids are losing." 20 minutes later, they were on the county road heading east, Marcus's F-250 cutting through darkness broken only by its headlights. The drifter sat in the passenger seat, her hands wrapped around a thermos of coffee she hadn't drunk from. Tom was in the back, arms crossed, making his skepticism known through pointed silence. Derek had stayed behind after Ellen put her foot down, much to his vocal disappointment. "Turn here," the drifter said, pointing to what looked like a gap in the trees that Marcus would have driven past without noticing. The truck lurched onto the logging road, and immediately the ride got rougher. Branches scraped against the sides. Snow sat deeper here, untouched by plows, and Marcus could feel the tires searching for traction. The drifter kept her eyes on the terrain ahead, occasionally calling out obstacles. A fallen log, a washout in the road, a spot where ice had formed in a treacherous sheet. "You really walk this alone?" Marcus asked. "In winter?" "I walk a lot of places alone," she said. "Safer that way sometimes." Tom snorted from the back. "Safer than what? Having people around who might actually help you?" She didn't turn around. "I find people usually help themselves first. Can't fault them for it. It's just easier not to be in the equation." They drove in silence for another few minutes, the road climbing gradually, the trees pressing closer. Then the drifter held up a hand. "Stop here. See those rocks?" Marcus hit the brakes. Ahead, the headlights illuminated a tumble of boulders completely blocking the road, some of them the size of compact cars. Snow had drifted against them, creating a solid wall. "End of the line for the truck," the drifter said, already unbuckling her seatbelt. "From here it's 16 miles on foot." Tom leaned forward. 16 miles? In this cold? That's a death march." "Not if we manage it right," she said, pulling a small compass from her pocket along with the map. "We keep a steady pace, not too fast. Too much sweat and we'll freeze when we stop. We layer smart. We take breaks in sheltered spots when we can find them. We watch each other for signs of cold injury. And we navigate carefully." Marcus killed the engine and climbed out. The cold hit him like a physical thing, stealing the breath from his lungs. The wind had dropped like she'd predicted, but the temperature was bitter, the kind of cold that found every gap in your clothing. He pulled his hood up, yanking the drawstrings tight. The drifter was already moving to the rocks, finding a path through them that Marcus wouldn't have seen in daylight, let alone in the dark. She moved like water, her body remembering the route even though she'd only been through once before. When she reached the other side, she turned and waited, holding her flashlight so they could see the path she'd taken. Tom climbed through next, cursing under his breath when his boot slipped on the ice. Marcus came last, carrying the pack Ellen had stuffed with supplies. When he emerged on the far side, he could see the road continuing north, narrower now, squeezed between walls of pine. "How far to the Kellers?" he asked. The drifter checked her compass, then looked at the terrain. "At a good pace, we could make it in 4.5 hours. But we'll be lucky to manage 5 in these conditions. Maybe 6 if the snow's deeper than I remember. That puts us there right at dawn," Marcus calculated. "If we're lucky." She started walking, not waiting to see if they'd follow. "Might be later if we run into trouble." They fell into a rhythm, the drifter in front setting the pace, Marcus behind her, Tom bringing up the rear. The snow crunched under their boots, loud in the pre-dawn stillness. Above them, the clouds were thinning, and occasionally Marcus caught glimpses of stars, hard and bright and impossibly distant. The first mile passed in relative silence. The second mile, Tom started complaining about the cold, about the stupidity of this mission, about the fact that his feet were already going numb. The drifter didn't respond, just kept moving with that steady, ground-eating pace that looked effortless, but Marcus knew from his own hunting trips was the result of years of practice. Around mile 3, the terrain changed. The road began to climb more steeply, and the trees opened up, exposing them to wind that had been blocked before. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees instantly. Marcus felt it cutting through his layers, finding the gap at his collar, the space where his gloves met his sleeves. The drifter stopped at a cluster of rocks that formed a natural windbreak. "Break," she said. 5 minutes. Drink something. Eat if you need to." Tom slumped against the rocks. "I knew this was insane. My feet are blocks of ice. How much farther?" 13 miles, the drifter said, pulling out her map and checking it with her flashlight. "We're making good time. Better than I expected." "Good time?" Tom's voice rose. "Lady, I can't feel my toes. Good time would be sitting in a warm truck instead of freezing to death on a fool's errand." "You want to go back? Go back," she said, not unkindly. "No one's forcing you." Tom looked at the darkness behind them, then at the darkness ahead. Marcus saw the calculation in his face, the misery of going forward versus the humiliation of turning back. Pride won. "I'm not leaving Marcus out here alone with," he started to say, but the drifter cut him off. "With what? A crazy homeless woman?" Her voice was level, but there was an edge to it. "You can say it. I've heard worse. But right now that crazy homeless woman is the only reason you haven't walked off a cliff or into a frozen creek. So maybe save your opinions until we're done." She stood folding the map. "If your feet are numb, we need to watch that. Can you feel your toes at all?" "They're just cold," Tom muttered. "That's not what I asked." Tom was silent for a moment, then, "A little. Tingling. That's good. Painful is better than numb. When it stops hurting, that's when we worry." She looked at Marcus. "You good?" "Cold but managing." "Drink more water. Dehydration makes the cold worse. Your body needs fuel to generate heat." They started moving again. Mile 4. Mile 5. The sky was lightening imperceptibly, black fading to deep blue at the eastern horizon. Marcus's legs had found their rhythm, but he could feel fatigue starting to creep in at the edges. The pack felt heavier. His breath came harder. At mile 6, they hit a section where the road crossed a frozen creek. The drifter stopped at the edge, testing the ice with her boot before stepping out. "Follow exactly where I step," she called back. "Ice is thinner near the banks." Marcus watched as she made her way across, each step deliberate. When she reached the far side, she turned and nodded. Marcus went next, feeling the ice creak under his weight but hold. Tom came last, moving too fast, and Marcus saw the moment one of his boots broke through, punching into the water beneath. Tom yelped and scrambled forward, making it to solid ground but with one leg soaked to the knee. He stood there, breathing hard, water already freezing on his pant leg. "We need to deal with that now," the drifter said, already moving toward him. "Wet in this cold is a death sentence." "It's fine," Tom said, but his voice shook. "Just a little water." "It's not fine." She was pulling spare clothes from her own pack, a pair of long underwear, thin but dry. "We need to get you into dry layers before that freezes solid and starts pulling heat from your core. I'm not stripping down in the middle of nowhere. Then you'll lose the leg to frostbite. Your choice." She handed him the dry layer. "Marcus, give him the space blanket from the pack. We'll rig a windbreak with our bodies while he changes." It took 10 precious minutes they didn't have. Tom changed behind the makeshift screen they created, his movements clumsy with cold and embarrassment. When he emerged, his wet pants bundled under his arm, the drifter took them and wrung as much water out as she could before stuffing them in her pack. "We'll need to move faster now," she said. "He's lost heat, and wet fabric conducts cold 25 times faster than air. The dry layer helps, but he needs to generate warmth through movement." "I'm fine," Tom insisted, but Marcus noticed his words were coming slower, slightly slurred at the edges. The drifter noticed too. "Stay close to Marcus. If you start feeling confused or sleepy, you tell us immediately, understand?" Tom nodded, and they started moving again. But the dynamic had shifted. Tom, who had been skeptical and mocking, was now quiet, conserving energy. And the drifter, who had been a stranger, an outsider, was now clearly in command. Mile 7, mile 8. The sky was definitely lighter now, that deep blue fading to grey. Marcus could make out more of the terrain. The towering pines, the rock faces rising on either side of the narrow road, the way the snow had drifted in sculpted patterns. At mile 9, Tom stumbled. Marcus caught him before he went down, felt how badly the man was shivering. "Hey," Marcus said. "You with us?" "Cold," Tom mumbled. "So cold. Maybe we should rest, just for a minute." The drifter was there instantly, her flashlight in Tom's face, checking his eyes. "No resting. Not now. Tom, look at me. What's your son's name?" "Derek," Tom said, but he had to think about it. "And what's your wife's name?" Silence. Tom's face went confused. Karen. No, wait. Carol. Carol. He's hypothermic," the drifter said quietly to Marcus. "Early stages, but it's setting in. We need to keep him moving, and we need to warm his core." She pulled another layer from her pack, her own spare fleece, thin and worn but dry and warm from being against her body. She helped Tom into it, then pulled a chocolate bar from her pocket and broke off pieces, pressing them into his hand. "Eat this. All of it. Your body needs the calories." "Don't want it," Tom mumbled. "Eat it anyway. That's an order." They got him moving again, Marcus on one side, the drifter on the other, keeping Tom between them. The pace had slowed significantly. Mile 10 passed like a dream, the world narrowing to the next step, the next breath of cold air. At mile 11, Tom's legs gave out. He went down hard, and when Marcus pulled him up, the man's eyes were unfocused. "Tired," he said. "Just let me sleep, just for a minute." "No sleeping," the drifter said sharply. She was rifling through the pack, pulling out the emergency blanket, the last thermos of coffee. "Marcus, we need to get heat into him or we're going to lose him." They found a spot where an overhang of rock provided some shelter from the wind. The drifter wrapped Tom in the emergency blanket, then forced him to drink the coffee in small sips. Marcus watched her work, efficient and calm, and realized that everything she'd said about knowing these mountains, about managing cold weather travel, it had all been true. "We're 5 miles out," she said, checking her map again. "If we can stabilize him enough to move, we can make it. But if he can't walk—" "I can walk," Tom said, and his voice was a little stronger. The coffee and the sugar from the chocolate were doing their work. "I can make it." "You're going to have to," the drifter said bluntly, "because neither of us can carry you 5 miles, and leaving you here isn't an option." She helped him to his feet, and they started moving again. Mile 12, 13. The sky was definitely lighter now, grey instead of blue, the shapes of the mountains emerging from darkness. Marcus could see his breath in great clouds. His own hands were clumsy in his gloves, his face numb except where the cold bit at exposed skin. But Tom was still moving, slowly, with support, but moving. And the drifter kept them going with a steady stream of navigation call-outs, encouraging words, warnings about obstacles. At mile 14 they heard it, a faint sound carried on the wind. A child crying. The drifter stopped, her head cocked. "There," she said, pointing ahead to where the road curved around a bluff. "That's them." Marcus felt a surge of adrenaline cut through his fatigue. The Kellers were real. The drifter had been telling the truth all along. He glanced at Tom, saw the same realization dawning on the man's face. They pushed forward, rounding the bluff, and there it was, a pickup truck nose down in a ditch, its rear wheels off the ground. In the growing light, Marcus could see figures huddled against the truck's side, wrapped in blankets and jackets. "Hello," the drifter called out. "James, Sarah, we're here to help." A woman's face appeared from beneath a blanket, and the relief in her eyes was so profound it was painful to see. "Oh, thank God, please, my husband, he's hurt so bad." They scrambled down into the ditch. James Keller was propped against the truck's tire, his legs splintered with tree branches and torn fabric. His face was grey with pain and cold, but his eyes were alert. The two kids, Amy and Ben, just like the drifter had said, were wrapped in every piece of clothing their parents could spare, their faces red from cold and tears. "You came," Sarah kept saying. "She said someone would come, but I didn't. I couldn't." "How long have you been here?" Marcus asked, already pulling supplies from his pack. "Since about 8 last night," James said through gritted teeth. "Tried to make it out on foot, but with my leg, couldn't manage it. Was starting to think." He didn't finish the sentence. The drifter was checking the kids, her hands gentle as she assessed them for frostbite and hypothermia. "They're cold, but okay," she reported. "Sarah, you did good work keeping them warm." "I remembered what you told me yesterday," Sarah said. "When we met you at the fire tower, you said if we got in trouble, share body heat. Don't waste energy trying to walk out in the dark." So we stayed put, all 4 of us together under every blanket we had. Marcus looked at the drifter, saw her give a small nod. She'd done more than just report an accident. She'd given this family the knowledge they needed to survive until help could arrive. "We need to move," the drifter said. "Sun's coming up, but the temperature's still dropping before dawn. Coldest time of day. We need to get everyone mobile and start back." "James can't walk," Tom said. He'd been quiet since they arrived, but his voice was stronger now, clearer. "Even with both of us supporting him." "Then we make a litter," the drifter said. "We've got rope, we've got that tarp from the truck bed. We'll fashion something we can drag on the snow. Marcus, you and Tom can manage that?" "We'll manage," Marcus said. It took 20 minutes to rig up something that would work, a makeshift sledge made from the tarp and 2 sturdy branches. They got James onto it, made sure he was insulated from the cold ground, then Sarah and the kids bundled up with every spare layer they had left between them. The journey back was slower, much slower. Marcus and Tom pulled the sledge while the drifter led Sarah and the kids, keeping them moving at a pace they could sustain. The sun broke over the horizon as they reached mile marker 3, painting the snow gold and pink, turning the frozen world into something beautiful and terrible. Tom had recovered somewhat with the forced activity of pulling the sledge and the warming temperatures as the sun rose. But Marcus could see the toll the night had taken on him. The way he moved stiffly, the careful way he placed his feet. At mile marker 2, they met the rescue crew coming up from town, a fire truck and an ambulance, lights flashing in the dawn light. The EMTs took over, loading James onto a proper stretcher, wrapping the kids in heated blankets, checking everyone for signs of serious cold injury. The fire chief, a man named Rodriguez, who Marcus knew from town meetings, stared at the drifter. "You're the one who reported this?" "I tried," she said. "Your dispatcher didn't believe me. Said it was impossible for anyone to be up the old logging road in winter." Rodriguez had the grace to look embarrassed. "Well, you were right, we're grateful." One of the EMTs came over, a woman with kind eyes and quick hands. "The kids are going to be fine. Some superficial frostbite on the fingers and toes, but nothing that won't heal. Sarah's exhausted but stable. James, he's going to need surgery on that leg, but you got to him in time. Another few hours and we'd be looking at amputation from the cold damage alone." She looked at the drifter. "You probably saved all their lives." The drifter shrugged. "Just had the right map." They rode back to town in the ambulance, Marcus and Tom and the drifter, while the EMTs worked on James. When they arrived at the hospital, the dawn was fully broken, the sky clear and bright and achingly cold. Sarah found the drifter in the waiting room, the kids holding her hands. "I don't know how to thank you," she said, and there were tears on her face. "You warned us yesterday about that shortcut. We should have listened. And then you went for help and you brought people back and..." She couldn't continue. "You're safe," the drifter said simply. "That's thanks enough." "Where are you staying?" Sarah asked. We want to make sure you have somewhere warm." "I'll find somewhere," the drifter said, and Marcus heard the walls going back up, the distance returning. "I always do." Tom cleared his throat. He'd been silent since they reached town, but now he stepped forward, his face serious. "I owe you an apology," he said quietly. "I said some things. I thought some worse things. I was wrong." The drifter met his eyes. "You were scared. People say things when they're scared. That's not an excuse." "No," she agreed, "but it's an explanation. And you stuck with it. You didn't turn back. That counts for something." Marcus watched the exchange, saw the careful distance the drifter maintained even now. Here was a woman who had risked everything to save strangers, who had guided them through darkness and cold and fear, and she still couldn't quite believe she had a place in their world. "I've got a cabin," he said suddenly. "Out on the east side of my property. It's small, but it's warm. It's empty right now. You could stay there. For a while anyway, until you figure out your next move." The drifter looked at him, surprise flickering across her face. "I don't do charity." "It's not charity. I could use help with the property. Wood needs chopping, fences need mending. If you're willing to work, I'm willing to provide room and board. Fair trade." She studied him for a long moment, and Marcus could see her weighing it. The appeal of a warm place to sleep against the risk of staying, of putting down roots, of letting people get close enough to hurt her. "1 month," she said finally. "Trial period, for both of us." "Fair enough." Tom coughed. "And Look, I don't have a cabin, but I could use help at the hardware store. Pays not much, but it's cash money and it's honest work if you want it after your month is up." The drifter's eyes went bright for just a second before she blinked and the emotion was gone. "I'll think about it." Ellen appeared in the doorway of the waiting room, her face relieved when she saw Marcus. "You're alive. When you didn't come back at dawn, I thought..." She stopped, looking at the drifter. "You're the woman from our porch." "I am." Ellen crossed the room and did something that clearly shocked everyone, including the drifter. She pulled her into a fierce hug. "Thank you. Thank you for bringing them back." When she let go, the drifter looked uncomfortable but not unhappy. "I should go," she said. "Let you all rest." "The cabin's unlocked," Marcus said. "Keys under the turtle statue by the door. You know where the property is?" "I'll find it." She left without ceremony, slipping out of the waiting room like a ghost, and Marcus watched her go. When he turned back, he found Sarah watching him. "She won't stay," Sarah said quietly. "She's not the staying kind." "Maybe not," Marcus agreed. "But maybe this time she'll surprise herself." The morning wore on. James went into surgery. The kids fell asleep in the waiting room chairs, exhausted by their ordeal. Tom went home to shower and sleep, his wife meeting him at the hospital with relief and recriminations in equal measure. Ellen stayed with Sarah, offering the quiet comfort of another woman's presence. Marcus finally made it home around noon. He drove past his house, out to the east property line where the old cabin stood among the pines. Smoke was rising from the chimney. When he knocked, the drifter opened the door and he could see she'd already made herself useful. There was a neat stack of split wood by the stove and she'd swept the floor. "Just checking that you found it okay," he said. "I found it." She paused. "Thank you for the offer. I wasn't expecting..." "People can surprise you," Marcus said. "Sometimes in good ways." She almost smiled. "Sometimes." He left her there and drove back to the main house. Ellen was waiting, hot coffee and questions both ready. As he sat at the kitchen table, warming his hands on the mug, Derek appeared in the doorway. "Dad showed me the video," Derek said quietly. He looked uncomfortable, which was a new expression for the usually confident teenager. "From when she first came to the door. I posted some of it online before Mom made me take it down." Marcus waited. "I'm an idiot," Derek continued. I don't know what I thought, that it would be funny or something. But watching it back, after hearing what happened," he shook his head. "Is she really staying in the old cabin? For now. Do you think would it be weird if I apologized?" "I think she'd appreciate it." Derek nodded and disappeared. Ellen leaned back in her chair, studying Marcus. "You think she'll really stay a month?" "I don't know, but I think she needs to know she could if she wanted to. And if she does stay, what then?" Marcus thought about the drifter's careful navigation through the darkness, the way she'd kept them alive with knowledge and skill and sheer determination. He thought about the walls she kept up, the distance she maintained, and the flicker of hope he'd seen when Tom had offered her work. "Then maybe we all learned something," he said. The story could have ended there. In many ways it did. The rescue was complete, the family safe, the crisis averted. But the real story, Marcus would later think, was just beginning. It was in the way Derek walked out to the cabin that afternoon, phone in hand, and offered a genuine apology. In the way Tom spread word around town that the hardware store would be hiring come February, and anyone who had a problem with who he hired could take their business elsewhere. In the way Sarah and James, once James was recovered enough, visited the cabin to thank the drifter properly and found her teaching Amy to read a topographical map by the light of the old stove. It was in the way the drifter, whose name they learned was Claire, slowly let the walls come down. Not all the way, probably never all the way, but enough to accept the cabin for 2 months, then 3. Enough to take the job at the hardware store and prove herself invaluable within a week. Enough to nod when people greeted her on the street instead of ducking her head and moving on. And it was in the way the community, which had been so quick to judge, so ready to dismiss, learned to see people for who they were rather than what they appeared to be. Because in the end, that was what the long walk through darkness had taught them all. That maps could be read, terrain could be navigated, and people could be so much more than the first impression they gave. If you're still with me now at the end of this journey, then you know something about perseverance too. You've walked these miles with Marcus and Tom and Claire through the cold and the doubt and the fear, and you've seen what lies on the other side of prejudice when people choose to keep moving forward. If stories like this one resonate with you, stories about real people facing real challenges, about redemption and second chances and the strength we find when we refuse to give up, then I hope you'll subscribe to this channel. There are more journeys ahead, more darkness to walk through, more moments when someone's map leads the way home. Join us for the next one. Until then, stay warm out there and remember, sometimes the help you need comes from the most unexpected places.